newer. So welcome everyone to the Watercolor Lemons painting. My name is Anita Thompson and I own Art Venture Workshops. I'm a mobile-based art business and I teach for libraries and I love it and I'm so happy you're here. This is being recorded and I will release this later tonight. I'll send it to both Karen and Rebecca and they'll send it out when they are able. And then it also goes on my YouTube channel in about a month. You can't see it there, right? You know, when I send it to Rebecca and Karen, you need the link, but then it will appear about a month from now. I kind of hide it on my YouTube channel until about a month has passed. So we are going to get started. As I mentioned in the chat, oh, we have somebody else coming in. You just need basic watercolors, mostly yellow, blue, green, brown, orange, red, basic ones. And welcome, Beth. We're just getting started, and I'm going to recopy the information in the chat for you. So welcome. Oh, and Debbie's coming on too. Okay. All right. Hey, Debbie, we're just getting started with the actual drawing part. So I just copied in the chat. Good to see you again. I saw Debbie earlier today at Warminster Library. Okay, so we are going to start in the middle of our paper. Oops, there we go. And we're going to start with the drawing. And just a reminder to have it be lightly colored or lightly drawn. I'm sorry, lightly drawn. And we're going to start first actually with the lemons. And so we're going to start over on the left here with this lemon. And you're probably thinking, how are we doing that? Because there is a twig in the way. And we're going to be drawing the twig as well. So that's why you also want to draw very light so that you can factor in all the other things that we're going to be doing, drawing. So I start off with this lemon on the left. And then I'm also going to kind of draw the twig from that as well. And as I mentioned, I am going to be drawing a little bit darker so that you can see it on Zoom. Put this down a little bit. I also like to mention that if you want to do something a little bit different to your painting, like if you want to leave something out, you are welcome to do that. I like to have people, you know, create their own painting, and it doesn't have to look exactly like mine. It can, but if it doesn't, that's okay too. So again, I've started on the left here. I've started the lemon, and then I'm drawing the twig right in front of it. Kind of the basic shape of it. Going down the bottom toward the bottom of our paper here. And what I like to do is, you know, draw the basic shape and then make it, you know, more of a double shape so that it's actually three-dimensional. And then I just erase the previous lines that were drawn that don't need to be there anymore, but it helps with the shape of the lemons to be able to erase kind of around it. So like what I just did there is, you know, I drew the lemon first and then I erased the line that went through it. That is the, you know, the twigs or the twig. And so we're going to draw the rest of the lemons. Right over here is another lemon kind of popping out here. So we draw another section of the twig happening. And this time on this lemon, you can actually see kind of the part that is a little more bulbous. I don't know what this would be called, but kind of sticks out on a lemon. It's funny. I know, Jean, you mentioned you had limes in your fridge. I do too, and I have some lemons too because saw this recipe recently. I don't know if it's a recipe, but it's like how to make your own Gatorade, and it's like natural Gatorade. So what you do is you take lemons and limes, and then you add a little bit of salt. Or maybe it's like an electrolyte drink. It's kind of like which I guess Gatorade really is. You add a little bit of salt and a little bit of honey. Yeah, right. And it's supposed to be good, and I haven't done it yet. But that's why my lemons and my limes are in the fridge, why I bought them this weekend. And I thought maybe I'll try it. And I haven't done it yet. So tomorrow will be the day. I'll have to report back. So we have this lemon happening here, and we have our third lemon, which is coming out in this section. And we're going to go back onto the sort of the branch areas and make them a little more branch-like, in the sense of when we do it at first, we kind of create a generalized shape of, a twig. And then I like to go back and make some more bumps along the way. So we're going to do that. All right, so our last lemon here. And of course, we're going to get the leaves in. I like this one. And the lemons kind of remind me. So I'm going to be releasing this to all the librarians. My husband Chris and I are going to Italy in October for our 10-year anniversary. And we're very excited. And he read about, I don't know if he's been really good at, like, he did all the research himself. And so if anybody has any tips, throw those in the chat. Because there's,
Tuscany?
yeah, I think Tuscany, where they have these really gigantic lemons, and it might be Tuscany, I forget. And I think there's orange lemons too, like they're orange colored, and they're kind of known for it. I don't know if that's Tuscany, or I can't remember. There's a Chincatin. I don't know. I'm gonna mispronounce all this stuff because, and you think, like, I'm like half Italian. I'm embarrassed. I know I'm not going to be able to, like, understand. Um, I only know curse words in Italian from my grandmother. And I do know a few other things, but I remember we were in Disney years ago, and if you've been to Disney, you go to, like, Epcot, and you go to the different countries. And I remember we ate in Italy, and I could not understand a word that girl was saying, and I felt really bad. I had to keep saying, "I'm sorry. Are you saying salad?" She had a very thick accent. So I don't know how well I'll fare, but thank goodness for Google, and I think it's Google Translator. I think I'll be okay. Anyway, we're gonna add leaves to these lemons. And so, you can add more leaves if you want. You can, add them in different spots if you don't like where I have them. So feel free to do that. But I draw the general shape of the leaves, and then what we do is we go back with our watercolors and really paint those in. So I've put 2 leaves here already. And now I'm working on the other one that kind of comes out on the left here with part of sort of a knobby section of the twig here. So here's that twig. It's kind of the knobby section, and then we have the leaf here. Yeah, I'm very excited for the obviously the artistic part of Italy, and my husband thinks I'm going to come back with lots of inspirational ideas, and I think he's right. I'm very excited, like architecture wise, and I don't know, lots of stuff, I guess. I've never been out of the country, so I'm really excited for it. So here we are with almost the last leaf here, and then we have one happening right here on the right. I realize I drew a little bit over to the left side of my um, watercolor paper. I don't know why I did that. I should have moved it a little to the right. But here you go. Maybe I'll cut it out later and put it on another piece. So the last part that we're going to do before we actually start to do the watercolor is now just sculpt a little more of the twig part here. So again, what I like to do is just make it a little bit bumpier. I'm going to go in a little closer now with my camera. And so basically, like I'm going to come in over here and just go in and out, you know, making some bumps. And I'm making it darker so that you can see what I'm actually doing here. You know, and if you're okay with yours, how it looks, and don't want to touch it, that's fine. I just felt like that I needed to add a few more kind of, you know, I wanted it to be a little more twig-like. And so a variation in some of the thick and thinness of the branches. And adding a few more smaller kind of twigs on the side too. I'll do this one. There we go. So again, just a reminder that you want your drawing to be light and not as dark as mine. So if the pencil is showing through a bit, you can take your eraser and just lighten up your lines so that they are lighter before we get started. Because our next step is going to be the painting. I'm just lightening mine up a little bit. And we're going to start with the background. And so I have a very basic watercolor set here. This is Crayola. And I'm going to take the blue and put it in the tray here. So if you have a set that's similar to this, you definitely want to make use of the tray here for your palette in order to mix colors, because we will be mixing colors. So I'm going to put my paper towel underneath it so you're able to see. So I'm going to get into that blue, and we want to start off with more water than color. And in order to do that, I have the blue here, and then I'm adding water to it. So with watercolor, we always want to start off lighter as far as the paint goes. And the way that I got this background was to actually use my paint in a circular motion, or my brush. So what I'm doing is kind of creating almost like, I'm thinking as if I'm making clouds. And so you can see that I leave spaces of the paper. And then as I'm going closer to the actual lemons and the the branch part, I'll get darker. But first, I want to create sort of a very light, wispy kind of background, and it's kind of fading as it gets further away from the lemons. And so doing that first. So it's kind of a quick process in that you use the water and then you kind of push around the blue. As you can see, I'm doing it kind of quickly. And then you're going to have that dry a little bit, and we'll go back in with a little darker application. Even this would look good as just, the background. You can also feel free to add some purple to it if you wanted. That would make it more of a royal blue. And that's our first layer. Watercolors are best when you layer them in the sense of going from light to darker, which means, a little more water first and then adding more of the paint. So we're going to let that first layer kind of dry. And we're going to move on to the lemons. And that is going to be sort of the same process of adding in kind of a quick yellow application that's a bit lighter, and also making sure that you leave a spot or two that is not painted. So the white of the paper, let's see if I can kind of move my light here. So the way that I was able to do this one and convey that there was light on it was by painting around sort of some spots and leaving spots blank without painting them so that the paper shows through. So I'm doing the same thing here. And again, our first layer is the yellow, but then we're going to start mixing in some orange. We're going to mix in a little bit of yellowish green. And we're going to do the same with the leaves as well. Whereas with the leaves, we are going to also dab on our first layer. And that's going to be like a yellow and green mixture. So it's going to kind of come out like a lemony, like a light green. I'm showing that right here. So again, I've mixed yellow and the green, And same thing, I'm just gonna kind of quickly paint the leaves. And oh yes, I will absolutely slow down, Marilyn. Yeah, I apologize. We're just doing kind of quick applications of things, but yeah, if I'm going too fast, please let me know. So thank you for that. So far it would be, you've done the background first layer, the yellow, excuse me, yellow first layer on the lemons, and then a mixture of green and yellow for the leaves. And we're going to let those dry. The last part we actually do is going to be the twig in front of everything. But we want to build up the other layers. So our next layer is we're going back to the background, and we're going to start adding a little bit darker with our color, our blue. And this is where I like to start going closer to the actual lemons and the branch. And then we're going to pull that color again, with a little bit of water. So again, I use kind of a round, I'm kind of painting in circles. And then I might pull that color using a little bit of water, like right here. You see how I'm kind of pulling it into the rest of the background, but I like to leave this spot around a little bit lighter. So then I'll go back, think of your brush and the water as either a blender, right? So now I went back with a little bit of water, and right where the actual, cloudy part is going into the lighter part, and I blend that together by going in circles with the tip of my brush. And I'm going to keep repeating that process as I go to each, around each lemon. So again, I go a little bit darker with the color. And then I add a little more water. Kind of pull from it. So that you're getting this gradual buildup in the spots where you want it, which, like I said, I liked to do it kind of closer to the middle of the painting. So meaning that it's close to either side of the branch. And then sometimes kind of around the lemons, but then fading it out by adding, using water against the darker areas to kind of pull that color into the other sort of cloudy area. Again, just by using water and going around. So see, we're getting a nice background. Keep going down here. Think of your brush as an extension, almost like a kind of like a colored pencil. That's how I think of it. Pencil or a colored pencil. And again, I'm adding water down here. Oops. Sorry, it looked like I got a phone call on my phone. So I use my phone as a document camera, and then it kind of messes with the angle. Oh, sorry. Hold on just 1 second. Oh, it's a little fuzzy. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm going to go a little closer again as well. So we're going to keep going around. To the other side. Repeating that process of just, going a little darker. In the spots that you want a little darker, which, as I mentioned, for me, it's really where the branches are. Kind of close to the middle there. And then adding, a dab of water to kind of bring out as if you are, shading it, making it a little lighter with your pencil.
So darker near the branch?
Yep. Yeah, so like, see right here. And then I kind of start to fade it out. And remember to go, around the leaves too. And you can make it look how you want. You don't have to have it go darker around there. I just kind of like that. Like, see right here, make a little bit darker there, darker here. Kind of in the spots where I guess it kind of touches where the branches are, like the sort of like the V sections of where the branch and the the twigs kind of happen. And this is where, if you want, you can add, some more different colors. If you wanted to add, as I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to add more of a purple, That's going to give you, a different blue, more like a royal blue. Whereas this, at least from, if you're using a Crayola or mostly Crayola, their blue is like turquoise almost. So if you mixed it with green, it would be more obviously of a greenish blue. And then if you mixed it with purple, it would be more of a royal blue. And then if you mixed it with black, it would be more like a smoky blue, almost like a gray blue. So you have some options there. Again, now I'm just going back and kind of making some areas a little bit darker by going back again for a third time, adding a little more color and less water. Oops, looks like my lemon color bled a little into my background here. I'll fix that. We're gonna let that dry for about 2 minutes. And we're gonna move on to our lemons again. Again, building up the color gradually. Watercolor works best when you build it up gradually. And our next color then for the lemons is going to be yellow and orange, so that we're going to get kind of a golden yellow. So here's my yellow. And then I'm going to add in some orange. So it's going to be a bit of a golden, kind of a golden yellow. And that's going to be some of the shading on our lemons. And we want to do just, a light bit and use the tip of our brush to kind of paint it on. So again, we're kind of using this as a little bit shading, and we'll get a little darker with it eventually. But again, I'm taking the tip of my brush and I'm sort of blending that in. You can see the difference between this lemon and this one. This is just pure yellow. And this one has a bit of the orange and yellow. And so it's getting a little more golden. So that's our aim with the orange and yellow color here. And I just put a little bit on my brush. And just shading a little bit, sort of around. So if you're thinking, well, where should I shade it? So The shading would be, it's always a little darker, usually around the edges, unless there's a light source. And in our case, the light source is sort of in the middle of each lemon. So it would be a little bit darker around the kind of outlining of the lemon, but on the lemon side, right? Still on the lemon. And then right where, like the round part, and then where these little, I don't know what these little knob parts would be called. I bet you there's a name for them. So it would also be there as well, like almost like a line of it. And you're going to do this to all 3 lemons. Again, this is a bit of orange mixed in with some yellow. You can see I'm just kind of pushing around the color. We're also going to start adding some orange to it, like pure orange, and some lemony green to build up the color. So it's all very subtle, but it makes a powerful difference in how realistic they look. Yeah, they're getting there. You're going to make sure you have enough of that lemon green next. So again, that is yellow and green mixed together. We use that for the first layer of the leaves. And we're going to now use that on spots of the lemons. So I'm adding a little bit here at the top of this lemon. We don't want it all over because we're not making limes, not today. But there is just a tiny bit of green in in the lemons. So again, you want to kind of do it on the spots where maybe a little more where the flesh is, where we have it, where it's yellow. So maybe just add a little bit of green. Again, the green mixed in with the yellow. Again, not the whole lemon, but just, a little bit. And you're going to add a little spot of green to each lemon. Maybe 2 spots. Like on this one, I added a little bit up here and a little bit down here at the bottom. Now, if it's looking a little too, you feel like it's looking a little too green, you can go back to yellow. Add some yellow watercolor, but we're going to be adding some orange next. But again, we want this to dry for about a minute or 2. Just want to get it a little bit dry. And in the meantime, we can now start to add some green to our leaves. And so what I like to do for the leaves is add just a tiny bit of green on top of that yellow that we added. And um, I like to do a little bit of outlining to the leaves. So you can see that what I'm doing to this one, I'm kind of going a little in the middle for the vein, and then on either side, and then it gets a little darker right where it's pointy. We're going to go back later on with brown, but just adding a little bit of some green on top of what we have already. And you can sort of make the lines of the veins both in the middle of the leaf and then, coming from the middle to the sides. So I'm just gonna kind of highlight that one on the left there. And like I said, later on we go back with brown. Again, this is green. I'm using, this is a delicate painting, so I'm using kind of the tip of my brush, doing a little bit of an outline on the leaf, and then making some of the veins in green for now. And again, letting that sort of rest a bit. Oh, did you have a question, iPad 10? I'm going to ask you to unmute. I just put ask to unmute. If you want to click on that, you can ask or you can type it in the chat. So our next part is going to be actually adding orange now to the lemons, which here again, you'll start to add as sort of an outline to the oranges. So I'm going really slow and deliberate as I'm outlining. You can see I'm doing that. So let me make it more of an up close here. So I started with this one. And I'm just very slowly outlining around it. And then I'm going to add some shading with it too to kind of blend it with the yellow. Now, not over the whole thing, just parts where I want a little darker. I'm going to do that to each lemon. Again, I'm using the tip, and I have just a little bit of orange paint. Now, it depends how vibrant your orange is. If it's very vibrant, you might want to tone it down a little like we did before with the yellow. But mine is not very vibrant, so I'm painting directly on it. And again, so I go around and I outline and then add in some spots of a little bit darker with the orange. And if you want, you can go back in and add yellow on top of it so that it's not as dark. And again, I'm kind of mixing it in with my brush little by little. I might want to go back and add a few more yellow spots. It's just yellow. So I've done that just to make it a little more yellowy. All right, and working on the third one up here. Here again, making sure you kind of outline where that kind of, the nubby parts are on the top and the bottom. And with this lemon in particular, there would probably be some shading on the part that is sort of disappeared a little. You can kind of see it peeking out a bit from behind the twig part or branch part, I guess. I don't know why I called it a twig because it's really a branch. As you can see, I'm just, you know, touching spots with just a little bit of my brush in order to layer on the orange. And again, like I'm shading it. Going very gently. I'm going to hit a little more with yellow again. You know, and you can go back a second time and you can go in with a little bit of orange and brown mixed in if you want to get a little bit darker. I'll show you what that looks like. This is an orange and brown mixture here. And I'm just going to go in a little bit on this one and see where I'm adding a little bit darker. You know, it just gives it a little more of a honey color. So maybe there's a few sections where I want to make it a little darker. And again, that's usually kind of around the edge or where it's a little bit darker. Like on this one, a little bit at the top. And again, this is just orange and brown mixed together. Just to give it a little bit of, you know, a darker honey color. So here too. Again, this is orange and brown. It just gives a little subtle darkening of some areas. And when you're ready, you're going to go back into um, your leaves, and you can add some more green, and you can mix it with a touch of black, and you're going to get a little bit of a darker green, a darker shaded green if you want. So what I did was I went in with a little bit of green and a little bit of black. I might apply that to the ends of each of the leaves, and maybe where I want it to be a little bit darker. So here, right up against where it would be kind of nestled where that lemon is. And then at the end here, and maybe in the middle. Now you don't have to add, that darker area to it if you don't want to. I like to, for just a little bit of, it makes it look a bit more realistic. And then meanwhile, I like to go back in and add a little more green to kind of finish off the color. Because then we're going to go back in with some brown once it's dry. So again, I've mixed green and black. And now I'm making some of the veins on top of the leaves. Now, if your leaves are too wet, you want to wait until they're a little drier. So just kind of fanning them. Some of mine are a little drier. And again, I'm using the tip of my brush and very lightly kind of holding my brush like this and almost like above my painting. Just like touching it very lightly in order to make those lines. Right now, those lines are very faint. But we'll go back and make them a little darker using just brown. Also in the meantime, we're going to start on the branch, but in the meantime, you can also go back and make parts a little darker if you want, or even lighter. Like I'm going back and just adding a little more yellow to this lemon. And then even, I'd like to add just a little bit more of some blue. in this section with the background. Now again, you don't have to. I'm just kind of looking at it and I want to just add a few touches before we start on the final areas. Do a little more blending with the background. Our next step is going to be adding the first base color to the branches. So for the first base color, it's sort of a yellowish, kind of a yellowish brown. And then on top, so you can see this is sort of a yellowish brown here. And then on top, we start to add brown mixed in with black so that we get a darker brown, specifically in sort of the joints of where, you know, the branches kind of meet. So do you see that kind of like where it sort of V's off? So, but let's start off with some yellow mixed with brown. And you might still have some, actually, no, we haven't done the yellowish brown. We've done orange and brown, but this is yellow and brown. And so it's a very light color. Again, I kind of quickly go in, and if you want, you can even leave parts of the branch or branches the white of the paper. So this is kind of like just a kind of a quick wash of color. With each section. And we're going to let that sit. And in the meantime, we're going to mix our next color, which is going to be brown and black. And that is going to be very concentrated. So that's a mixture of brown and black. And that can start to go on our leaves while the rest of it is drying. And so, for instance, with our leaves, you can outline with it, make the leaves bumpy, and also go in the middle. with this color. So there's my first one. And you can also add to, the smaller parts here. See how dark that is? I'm going to kind of go in the middle of each one. Again, I'm almost skipping some spaces with my brush. And then go back and add the veins. And you can outline the leaves as well if you like. I really only outlined one, and that was this one. But if you want to outline them all, you can. And if you don't want to outline any of them, that's okay too. You don't even have to add this brown if you don't want. You can make it like a little bit darker of a green. Might outline all of these on this one. That's kind of what it looks like. And you don't even have to outline in a straight line, like a continuous line. You can sort of, add a little bit of an outline to maybe the top part where the leaf is kind of coming to a point, and then maybe at the bottom, whatever strikes your fancy. It will look good no matter what. We're going to start to add the finishing touches here. If your branches, they should be pretty dry at this point. So again, we're going to go in with some really dark brown. And then I also like to go in with some black, just pure black. So again, this is brown and black mixed. And you can see that the consistency is less water. And I'm turning my brush so that the point gets really pointy. See how I'm turning my brush and kind of sliding it into the color? So I'm going to use my point a lot. And we're going to start up at the top. And let me go in even closer here. Excuse my fussing around with this. So we're going to start at the top. And it's a little bit darker at the top. Let me go in and let me just change my angle a second. Sorry about that. That's what I wanted. And so again, I'm just going to very lightly kind of make lines on top of the base that we created. Sort of outline it at the same time. And the darker parts, I'm kind of shading it in with the brown, which is usually at the end of each of the twig areas. So I'm making the darker parts, kind of like the wood grain. And then we're also going to go back in with some black to make the other parts darker. So working the way down. And remember where, it kind of starts to branch off like, it's sort of like a V shape. It's usually a little darker in that area, just because it's on the inside. So that's what it looks like so far. And then now we go back in with the black. And you can even mix a little more of your black in with your brown if that works for you. I tend to use almost pure black because of how light the Crayola set is. Well, I am mixing a tiny bit of brown, but mostly black. So this is where the darker areas are added. So you can do things like, make where the bumps are a little bit darker. And just going along and making some of the parts a little darker. Especially as we get to the bottom here. We have some really thin kind of twig parts. You can even go back later on and add a little more black if you want. Some of the sections. I can't wait to see what these look like. I'm going to remove my spotlights.
Yours is awesome, Anita. Incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
The
Thank you.
pump is on. That looks great.
You're the best. So I'm going to stop the recording.